Okay, good morning and welcome to Spartan Talks. My name is Sam Chen. I serve as Assistant Professor of Political Science here at Northampton Community College, and I have the privilege of hosting our Spartan Talks. Spartan Talks is a TED-like program featuring the elite faculty of this college. As you know, many of our faculty members have interest outside the college and are not just professionals in the classroom, they're professionals in their fields outside of the classroom. And that's certainly the case this morning. I'm excited this morning to introduce Rachael Gorchov, who serves as Assistant Professor of Fine Art here at Northampton Community College and is a founding member of the Tiger Strikes Asteroid New York Gallery. Gorchov's work has been exhibited around the world and currently is on exhibit at the Owen James Gallery in New York. She holds her MFA from Hunter College and her BFA from the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. She's also, as she tells me, been a member of a community-supported agriculture every summer for the past 8 years, and maybe she could share a little bit more about that later on. For those of you who are on social media, you can follow her in her studio on Instagram at Rachael Gorchov and at TSANY. And this morning, Professor Gorchov will be talking about community, specifically the idea of making community in an artist-run gallery. And so without any further ado, we'll turn it over to Professor Rachael Gorchov.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Professor Chen. And I should clarify, I realize I need to update that bio because my show at Owen James Gallery closed over the summer. But you can still see images of that show on Owen James Gallery's website and on my website, which I'll be sharing with you at the end of this presentation. So as Professor Chen had mentioned, I'm going to talk about the gallery that I co-run called Tiger Strikes Asteroid, and I'm a member of the TSANY location. And why do I clarify that it's the New York location? Because we have locations in 5 cities around the United States. So the first location was founded in Philadelphia in 2009, followed by TSANY, Tiger Strikes Asteroid New York, in 2012, and I'm a founding member of the New York location. Then a couple years after that, we formed a Los Angeles location and then a Chicago location, and our newest location is Greenville, South Carolina. So all of these spaces, and this is our New York group on Zoom. I've replaced on this slide a group shot from one of the retreats that we had at the Wasaya Project, which is a residency in upstate New York. This is one of our more recent Zoom group portraits. So we are all artist-run galleries. So what that means is that all of our members are also artists, and we also run galleries. And I want to say it was in 2015 we became a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which has made it so that we can apply for grants and has really just helped to clarify our mission, which I won't read for you today, but essentially our mission is to create space and opportunities for emerging artists and also established artists, but really to create space for artists in the art world, which is certainly dominated by artists, but also by galleries who have more of a commercial goal. The fact that we're artists and we all contribute financially and with our time to make this thing happen really creates a bit of opportunity in the art world. So as I said, I'm going to focus mostly on TSA New York, as this is really where I've spent most of my time. But I'll talk about some of the projects that we've done in all the locations. So this is our very first show in 2012 called Finders Keepers, opened November 9th of 2012. And I'm going to just kind of move through a few of the shows that we've done. So to start this show, about 10 of us got together. We rented what was really an artist studio in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and painted the walls, built a storage closet, and hung our first show. And then I'm jumping ahead a little bit here to our newer space, the space that we're in now. So this was an installation that we worked together with a gallery we share the space with called Transmitter, in a loading dock space on the ground floor of the building where our gallery is. So this is it. We moved into a larger space in 2015, just a couple of blocks away in Bushwick. And this was a large multimedia installation. But our typical gallery space, you see sort of a corner of it here. This is a solo exhibition by the artist Didier William, and we were so happy to, he's a Philadelphia-based artist, we were so happy to have given him his first New York show, which really kind of catapulted his career. This show had a New York Times review. Following this show, he had 2 simultaneous solo shows and 2 commercial galleries in the city. And, we're really pleased to, this really was in support of our mission to give an artist a platform who maybe otherwise wouldn't have. For instance, this is an installation by an artist named Aska Goto, in which she had tediously translated a novel her father wrote. Her father is a novelist who writes in Japanese. She barely speaks Japanese. And over the course of several years, word by word, translated her father's novel as this series of essentially annotated manuscripts. So we were so happy to have shown this work. It was installed around the gallery on bulletin boards. There's real labor of love. We're so happy to have shown it. Also in 2018, we started a residency program, which I'll get back into this a little bit later in the presentation. So in 2020, during the COVID-19 lockdown, we were not able to have exhibitions. And then we thought, well, what can we do with this space? And we decided to start giving artists short-term residencies where they could use our space, be alone in the space, and make work. But this residency we did in 2018 was really a precursor to that. So this is artist Megan Brady making these wall-sized paintings on paper, and this residency culminated in an exhibition of her work. And when I talk about an artist residency, what I'm talking about is essentially giving an artist time and space to use, in this case, our gallery as a studio space. So in 2019, right before the COVID-19 pandemic, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary because the Philadelphia space opened in 2009. So together with the other spaces, we collaborated on 4 simultaneous exhibitions. At that time, we only had 4 locations. The Greenville location hadn't opened yet. And we worked together to find 4 artists from all of the 4 cities that represent Tiger Strikes Asteroid locations. And we had an artist from 4 artists at different points in their careers, so some emerging, some established, from these 4 cities at our 4 locations simultaneously. So we were really, really pleased to pull that collaborative project off. And that this is the exhibition that was at the Tiger Strikes Asteroid New York location. So in addition to working collaboratively, we take turns curating exhibitions in our spaces, and we feel very strongly that if it's, say, my time to curate an exhibition, I have complete control over what I choose to do in that slot. So I'm sharing with you the latest exhibition that I curated, and for this exhibition, I decided to collaborate with a former colleague of mine from Fairfield University to put together a show dealing with water and the role water plays in our health and our well-being. So this show was originally slated to open in March of 2020, so that was delayed. It did eventually open up in September of 2020. It's a large show with a lot of ambitious installations. For instance, you can see the installation on the pipes on the upper left-hand side. In the past, I've invited artists to have solo exhibitions of their work, invited other artists to collaborate with me on putting together an exhibition, and my colleagues at the gallery really do the same. We each give one another complete agency on what we choose to do in our slot. So in addition to curating exhibitions, we both locally and on the network level, we have a few opportunities for artists and just projects that we're working on. So for instance, in 2014, the TSA New York location had a series of workshops for artists, like how to apply for art opportunities, how to develop a website, how to write an artist statement. And this was a lot of fun. In 2015, we ran an art fair in Miami during Art Fair Week, Art Basel Week. So for any of you familiar with the art fair circuit, in December in Miami, the world sort of converges on an international art fair called Art Basel, and there are a lot of satellite fairs around the city. And we ran a satellite fair in an abandoned hotel right on the beach, on Miami Beach, where we invited artist-run galleries from around the country to show their program, show what they do. So each gallery took a room, what it was a former hotel room, and installed artwork. And we had a series of lectures and performances that accompanied the art fair, and one of the performances happened to be a wedding. And so what you see here are the couple on the far right getting married as a performance at the artist-run art fair in Miami Beach in 2015. In 2018, partly as a fundraising effort, and partly also thinking about, well, how can we support artists while raising funds for the gallery, we network-wide, so among all 4 locations, we put together an archive of preparatory works that artists make in the lead up to their own work, and this was called groundwork. So we asked each artist for 2 pieces. One we sold, and the other went into an archive that we then donated to the New York Public Library. So this was a way of getting artists, oftentimes emerging artists, into an institutional collection. Here in New York, we have a flat file program. Well, we had a flat file program that ended in 2020. So this was in part of a fundraising effort, and in part just a way to show more artists that we can, sort of in a typical 12-year period. And I skipped ahead. I guess I didn't skip ahead. So as I said, in 2020, we ended the flat file program, and for a variety of reasons decided to turn our open call into a solo show open call. So our first solo show open call was this past December with artist Stephanie J. Woods, and this is Stephanie installing her exhibition. If I have time, I'll share with you our Instagram. You can hear Stephanie talking about her show and giving us a virtual tour of her show on our Instagram account. So like I said, in the pandemic, we've had to be really creative with what our presence is, and something that we've continued to do. So when the gallery shut down, one of our members, our founding member, Alex Paik, had this amazing idea to curate exhibitions as PDF documents. So for a small fee, which part of that fee went to the artist, part of the fee went to Artist Relief Fund, which is a nonprofit organization. Anybody could buy a PDF copy of this exhibition, and the idea is they print it out and install it anywhere they want. So this PDF exhibition is installed on this fence, as you can see. And if you, this is a hyperlink. If I have time, I'll share the TSA PDF Instagram with you. But if you visit TSA_PDF on Instagram, you can see just an archive of all of the TSA PDF exhibitions that people have installed all over the world, really. These have been installed all over the world. And as I mentioned, we kind of rebranded our residency program as TSA Star during the pandemic. So this is one of our residents from over the summer, Michael Brito, making work in our space. And this is another one of our residents, Peter LeBure. And we also will sometimes spotlight artists on our Instagram, artists who are in our residency program or not. At this point, now that we have a functioning gallery space again, we're not having a residency program, but this is just sort of another way to give artists a voice. And this is the Instagram Spotlight program that we have at TSA NY. And as I mentioned, we were so pleased to have that Didier Williams show reviewed in the New York Times. We've had our shows reviewed in the New Yorker, then art journals, Hyperallergic, Art Forum. The show in the lower right was one of our TSA Philadelphia shows. So, really across the board, our spaces have had a lot of have had a lot of press coverage and appreciation for what we do, which is huge. So I wanted to finish my talk by talking a little bit about, well, why do I do this? I ask myself sometimes why do I do this? But I'd say primarily, and I'm speaking for myself, but also speaking for my colleagues at TSA across the different locations. I think we do this to keep community going. Really, I think community. So much of what I've gotten personally as an artist is from being a part of a vibrant community where my peers are passionate about talking about art, showing art. It keeps me engaged as an artist curator. It keeps me from having tunnel vision, from not only looking at what I do and what's interesting to me, but also what's happening maybe adjacent to what I'm doing. For instance, the water show that I curated. By having conversations with my co-curator, Joe Yarrington, I was introduced to artists and introduced to looking at work who I never would have necessarily looked at otherwise. Having a gallery is agency. So I think oftentimes as artists, we feel like we lack agency in the art world. We're looking for places to show our work. If I, as an artist, create a gallery, I'm creating agency for myself and for others. And that's a really beautiful and powerful thing. Having and that goes along with having institutional clout. All of a sudden, myself and my peers are no longer artists desperate for opportunities. We have a hand in turning this art world into something that we want it to be. And that goes along with creating opportunities for others. And really, I think the artist run, and I think my peers would agree with me, the artist run model is, I think, a unique model in the art world that's not necessarily driven by commercial success. I'll tell you, we do make sales, but we make very few sales. But luckily, that's not, sales is not the driving force to what keeps our doors open. And I think that adds a unique voice in the dialogue. So what are we do? This is a version of a presentation I did at the College Art Association conference a couple years ago with one of my colleagues, and we were talking about, well, what's our secret sauce? What's kept us going for these 12 years? And I think, for one, having defined roles, but also having total freedom. So we certainly take turns with the administrative tasks of the gallery, but then when it comes to curating a show, we give each other complete freedom. We use collaborative tools such as Slack, and before Slack existed, we used Facebook groups. So just, finding ways of not having to meet all the time, finding ways of sort of communicating with one another asynchronously. But it's important that we do meet. And I think in COVID times, we've been wanting to meet more often, which, Zoom has certainly allowed us to do that. Rotating leadership is huge. We have a 2-year limit for our gallery directors. I was a gallery director. I'm now a member. My colleagues are now the directors. It really contributes to this sort of non-hierarchical structure, which an entirely volunteer organization really needs. It makes all of us feel like we're an equal partner organization. Social media is incredibly important. And, I think we're all just really committed to seeing this project sort of continue. And all of this contributes to just a really clear framework, so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel every month. We sort of know how the wheel works, and we can work within that structure. So that is the end of my presentation. If you'd like to visit our website, you can visit tigerstrikesasteroid.com. And I thought I had our Instagram handles, which I don't have in this presentation, but as Professor Chen mentioned, TSA_NY. Visit us on Instagram, and you can visit my own Instagram, Rachael Gorchov, which is just Rachael Gorchov. Thank you. And I don't know how I'm doing with time, but if we have a little extra time, I'd love to share with you the TSA PDF, Instagram, and our website. But I'd love to.
I think we do. So I was actually going to say, if there are questions, you can guys start dropping those in the chat. But in the meantime, Professor Gorchov, if you would, we would love to see that.
Okay, great. So let's see here. Okay, so I wanted to share with you a few of the special projects that we are working on. So this is our Instagram, and like I said, social media is incredibly important, especially in these times. I'll tell you, me personally, I am not a social media person, but luckily, because we all share responsibilities, I don't have to really stay on top of our social media. We have a few members who are really into social media, and they take care of this. But you can see our archive stories at the top. On our IGTV is where you'll find, for instance, this interview with Stephanie J. Woods. Actually, I'm interviewing her, or her partner is interviewing her, but I'm kind of facilitating. And then our TSA spotlights, as I mentioned, this is a place for us to spotlight artists we don't necessarily show, and it's just another way to create space for voices for artists. I won't click on those videos here, but I'd love for you to take time and take a look at them. You see me here. This is a gallery walkthrough I did with my co-curator, Jo Yarrington, on the show that I co-curated with her. And because we ended up installing we installed in the summer, the show opened in the fall. Still, we were limited in terms of how many people we could invite in our gallery. So the pandemic, I will say, has really forced us to be creative with how we bring visitors into the gallery in other ways besides inviting them into our doors. And the spotlight has emerged from that, as to these virtual walkthroughs. And as I said, the TSA PDF program, which I'll share with you here. Oh. So the TSA PDF. So this is, I recommend taking some time here in the TSA PDF thread, because there's just a tremendous number of creative ways people who buy the PDFs choose to install them. And so this is our official thread, but then if you go into the tagged, you see people all over the world installing our PDFs and then tagging us in them. So yeah, I do encourage you to take some time in this TSA PDF Instagram thread. And you can view documentation of our past exhibitions and see what's coming up, see what's currently in the gallery here on our website. So for instance, this was, I think, our last exhibition in the New York location. And we should have a link here for installation shots. I'll have to check on that. Well, for instance, Stephanie J. Woods, who was our solo show, open call solo show. You can see images of her show here. And now I'd love to open it up for questions.
Excellent. Well, our first question is going to come from Professor Randy Boone, who is actually director of the Center for Teaching and CTLT. Randy, it's slipping me now, the entire acronym. He's director of the CTLT here at Northampton Community College. I'm actually going to let Professor Boone unmute himself and ask the question directly.
Yeah, it's toast, lettuce, and tomato. The TLT. Yeah, so like I've done stuff in the poetry world, and this might be kind of a weird thing to be drawn from what you were talking about, but like the way you were talking about sharing administrative roles and rotating leadership and stuff like that, like one of the things that like, you know, is really hard to balance sometimes is when you do things like this, there's aspects of it that are really motivating and like really give you creative energy. And then there's other aspects that completely burn you out because it doesn't push that button, you know, like when you have to schedule appointments or something like that, like that's not very inspiring. It just needs to get done. Like, so like my question is kind of like, how do you keep it so that it's more motivating than draining? But I feel like you answered a lot of that in what you've already talked about. And I just wanted to say, I really appreciated that. That really struck a chord with me, because if you don't have those things in place, it's really easy to see how some great projects are short-lived because it just doesn't sustain people in a way that keeps you wanting to do it and draws energy out of you that you would rather use for something else.
Yeah, and sometimes it is tedious, and I think that rotation of leadership is really important, because that director role can really burn you out. And then, you know, after your tenure as director, you can kind of fall back. It's like, you know, migrating birds. They just, when you get tired of being the leader, you just kind of fall back and you can follow for a little while. And, you know, inevitably some people end up doing more than others. But, you know, if everyone has a sort of, has their little project that they're working on, it works. And, you know, yeah. And I would say right now, I'm somebody who's maybe doing a little bit less than others, but that's okay, because we have this sense of it sort of all balancing out eventually.
Yeah, thanks. Like I said, I don't know if that came out as a question, but I really appreciated both that you spoke to that and like what you shared that you're doing to kind of keep people invested and interested. Because it's tough. That's not easy.
I mean, I think that rotating leadership can be challenging in that, you know, sometimes we're in a situation where people have been a leader and other people haven't yet, and it, you know, depending on, you know, we all are busy in our other lives, and it can be really hard to find that time to take on that responsibility. So, you know, sometimes it's tedious, sometimes it's hard work, sometimes it's hard. Yeah, hard.
And I get what you're saying about, like, you know, being able to fall back out of the leadership role every once in a while, because, you know, I'm sure artists have their act much more together than poets, but like when you have to try to organize poets for something, you know, that becomes your primary task because poets are flaky. That's just the way it is. And you put a lot of energy into that. And then, you know, it hits you a day later. Oh, yeah, like I could have gotten some ideas from that cool event, or I heard some really good stuff, but it becomes secondary. And you need a point, you know, being able to step away and get back to that point where you can really draw energy from the experience and not be the one setting it up is so important, like so vital.
I also think it's a situation where you want to be really clear about not taking on more than you can handle. That year that we did groundwork, after, you know, we thought that it would maybe be an annual event and then find a different institution to accept our artists' work every year. But it was just so much work, and we just decided, well, we need to think about where we want to place our energy. And you know, then on the other side of it, sometimes at meetings we'll be spitballing ideas, and people will have great ideas for projects. But you know, then the question is, well, okay, well, who's gonna do the work? And you know, while we all would love to, realistically, none of us really can. So then those projects just get shelved. None of them end up happening.
By the way, Rachel, this hole right here, that's your spot. That's waiting for a Gorchev right there.
Okay. Next time I'm at Monroe.
Randy, I appreciate those insights. Rachel, question actually here, question I have just listening to your presentation. You talked about creating community as a group of artists. All of you are like-minded in your pursuit, and there's almost a naturalness to it, but now you've really kind of stepped in and intentionally create that community. Outside of that, like you creating that, how difficult is it for in the artist world to find community?
I think that's a hard question to answer because it's very, very individualized. And also, I should say, you know, my knowledge for the most part is in the New York art community. And now that I'm out here in the Lehigh Valley, I'm kind of learning about how to create community in this new space with, in some ways, a different art culture. So for me personally, it's typically been spending a lot of time going to art openings, museum shows, getting out into these spaces where artists and art people are, and having conversations with them. With artists, I'll tell you, I feel so lucky to be an artist because wherever I go, I can invite myself over. I ask people I know, do you know anybody in this area? You know, likely somebody knows somebody. I get in touch with that person, and I ask if I can have a studio visit. So between artists, we swap studio visits, have conversations that way. Last January, I took a group of students to Egypt. We visited a few artist-run spaces in Egypt, in Cairo, and that's exactly how I found those connections. I asked if anybody knew anybody in Egypt. A few people did, and they made that introduction. So that's how I've done it. I think for many people, social media has been a way of building meaningful connections. For others, applying to art opportunities, like really spending a lot of time applying to residencies and fellowships and then meeting people that way has been a method.
Yeah, thank you for that. Question here, wants to know, did you mention that there is a location in Los Angeles? I'm assuming LA here, I'm assuming would mean Los Angeles and not Louisiana. But yeah, so the question was there a location in Los Angeles, and perhaps just where are the other locations and how different are they from each other?
So let me go back to my presentation and I'll share my screen again. There we go. So, always the problem with Zoom gets in the way. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint?
I don't. Hold on. Let's
Okay.
see here.
Okay, this. Oh, let me try it again.
So you may need to share it again.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay, great. So all the way back to the beginning of the presentation, we have Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Greenville. And the Greenville actually doesn't have a physical space. Were founded in 2019, and as you can imagine, right when they were sort of figuring out what their next steps were, early 2020, things started to shut down. So, but I think that's really great. There is kind of an itinerant spot. They open up different spots in different parts of the city. They had a lawn exhibition not too long ago where works were installed in lawns all over the city. But to answer your question about Los Angeles, or how are they all different, in some ways they're similar, in some ways they're different. The New York physical space is the smallest space of all of the 4 physical locations. Like every group of people, every space has its own sort of personality. And I'll say in New York, we've recently invited some new members, which is changing the sort of the personality of the New York space, which I think is really exciting. I don't know if that answers your question. I visited the old Los Angeles location. I actually haven't been to the new Los Angeles location. I've never been to the Chicago location, so I don't totally know what they're like, but they put on good shows. The LA space feels definitely more LA. I don't know. There's kind of more laid back and have, I don't know, I think their shows all have brighter colors.
Do the spaces operate similarly in the sense that I know you talked about the artist in residency program that you guys do in New York? Is that something that's duplicated in other spaces, or do they kind of all operate independently and differently?
Independently, but then also I think cross-pollinate. So the Philadelphia space, I'm not sure what they're doing now. I know that they were staying closed for longer than New York in the pandemic. So the Philadelphia space has been doing a residency program in lieu of exhibitions for, I believe, throughout the fall. The Chicago space was doing a flat file. So yeah, I feel like there's this cross-pollination that happens between these sort of special projects that we're doing. But we all have come up with our programming on our own within the space.
Rachel, another question, and this is less so about the gallery per se, but more just about artists. And obviously artists are very diverse in what kind of art each of you does. And I think sometimes for people like me who are not artists, we tend to think of artists as a monolithic group. Everyone in the artist community does the same thing. How do you as an artist, or you and your fellow artists in the community, approach varying kinds of art? Is it generally a kind of a all-around acceptance of just everyone's going to have a different niche as far as what kind of art they do, or does there tend to be a preference of like our gallery's going to focus on this, or we're going to focus here, or certain styles? I mean, I'm not even sure if I'm using the right rhetoric, to be honest. But how do artists, because obviously you have a niche, how do you approach artists who are in a different niche, and is that community go across those differences?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Yeah, there's a million art worlds out there, and in terms of I'd say that are formed by oftentimes break down across many of the same lines that we see our society in general broken down between, whether it be political or racial or location or age. And you know, I would say in the last year, we as an organization are making a real intentional effort to look at what art world we exist in and how can we sort of reach outside of that space. You know, is this a space that we want to be in, or is it just the space that we found ourselves in? So in the past, when we were curating the flat file, we were really interested in, and for all of us, without even noticing, it was very, very easy to kind of choose artists who were in New York. And then when we sort of recognized that we had that sort of bias, we were making an intentional effort to look at artists from outside of New York City. And again, thinking about this way of creating, you know, creating space for many artists. Showing in New York is very important. So, you know, how can we as a New York artist-run gallery create these opportunities for artists around the world, around the country, to create to show their work. So hopefully that answers, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think it gives us an insight into that world that if we're not in that world, we don't really have the insight. So if there are other questions, again, please feel free to drop in the chat. Otherwise, Rachel, I've been talking with Randy Boone here about getting that TSA PDF up in their CTLTs here at Bethlehem and Monroe. And so how would we go about getting a copy of that? Also for anyone else that would be interested, where do we go to do that?
Well, I can certainly help anyone in the Northampton community get a copy. But the official, let's see here, the official way of getting a TSA PDF, and more importantly, if anyone wants to say make a donation and get a TSA PDF that way, and you know, then donate to the Artist Relief Fund and make sure that the artist whose work is in the PDF gets funds as well. Let's see, TSA PDF. I should.
Yeah, absolutely. We totally meant in the sense of purchasing it to support you and your colleagues, but also to showcase the work here at the college.
So I should know better how you can get a copy of TSA PDF officially. Okay, if anyone from the Northampton community who wants a copy of TSA PDF, you can write to me, rgorchov @northampton.edu. And I believe all you would need to do is write to, let's see, go to our website. Let's see, exhibitions, PDFs.
It's okay. We know you're not in a leadership role, so.
Right, I've stepped way back. Here we go. It takes us back to the PDF. Anyway, I will have an answer for you soon.
Okay, not a worry. We just thought it'd be cool to showcase that, and then in the meantime, support you and your colleagues and what you guys are doing.
Yes. Well, thank you.
No, our pleasure. Our pleasure. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to draw this to a close. And again, I just want to say thank you to, or unless Professor Boone has another question with his puppy.
No, she just needed to see what's going on.
Ah, very good. Very good. Well, every Spartan Talk is made better by our distinguished colleagues and their pets. So thank you for doing that. And just want to take a moment and thank Professor Gorchov for sharing TSA with us and the work that she is doing in cultivating community through artistry and artist-grown community. So Rachel, thank you for that. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam, for inviting me.
Again, I just want to thank all of you for attending, and we're going to wrap up this Spartan Talk. We do have 2 more coming up before the end of this semester, and we're currently working out our fall slate. So a lot of exciting talks coming your way. We hope you join us for those. Stay tuned to your email as those will be coming forward. And we will wrap up today and just thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye. Thanks.